Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really cool knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Medford Knife and Tool Praetorian Genesis T. The Genesis meaning the in-between size between the full-size Praetorian and the micro Praetorian, which we're going to talk about here in a sec. And then the T meaning full tie, but in this case we have a certain thickness of titanium and a certain thickness of blade, which again we will go into detail about. This knife was sent to me by none other than Mr. Dirk Warning on YouTube. Please subscribe to Dirk Warning. He sent me a whole bunch of Medford knives. I'm sure a lot of you guys saw that unboxing. He had messaged me and said, hey, you know, I have a lot of the knives that I think you're looking for. He said, I have a YouTube channel. I went to check it out, and I noticed a couple of things right off the bat. Number one, the guy's got well over 100 videos, and it seems like he's uploading every single day. In fact, I think I actually watched the video where he said he was doing that. Number two, the knives that he's actually got on his channel are insane. It's very difficult to find, you know, a channel on YouTube that's got all of this stuff in one place. So he's got a really, really unique channel, and he's got a great way of presenting this information. I just think his channel's awesome. He was somewhere around the 650-ish subscriber mark, and I thought, you know, he's trying to get to 1,000 because he's got this knife he's going to give away, and I thought, I think I can help with that. So the idea was actually to review his Medfords and, you know, push people his way a little bit at a time. It actually took... It took like 3 days to get him to 1,000. You guys were so awesome. Thank you so much for going and doing that. I really, really appreciate that, and I know Dirk does too. It's important that I get this knife reviewed because this is actually the knife he's going to be giving away for his 1,000 subscriber giveaway. So this actually, I spent a few days with it, got my thoughts on it. Fortunately, I've handled a lot of Medford knives and Medford Praetorians, so I kind of had my thoughts gathered already. But yeah, if you're not subscribed to Dirk, go subscribe to him. Thank you so much, Dirk, for sending these beautiful knives. Let's go ahead and get, oh, and of course, I can't forget this. Thank you so much to my generous patrons for supporting me during this time. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, there is, of course, a link down in the description. The support would mean the world to me. So the overall length of the Praetorian Genesis is coming in at, I mean, if you want to include the glass breaker, it comes in at just shy of 8 inches, but going by handle length, we're probably looking at about 7.6, maybe 7.7 inches overall. The blade length is coming in at, we're going to call that from the very tip, we're going to call that about 3.4. And then blade length is coming in at about 3, or cutting edge length is coming in at about 3.3. This is a really good size of Praetorian. I mean, here's the thing, guys. The Praetorian is known the world over as a monstrously hulking, I mean, everybody knows. Well, they see this knife, right? If they're even vaguely familiar with Medford Knife and Tool, they see this and they go, that's a Praetorian. It is one of the most instantly recognizable knives that exists. And the first time I saw it, I told Greg this in the town hall meeting on the Knife Junkie podcast. I said, the first time that I saw the Praetorian, it was exactly the same feeling as when Brendan from Step Brothers sees the drum set for the first time and that really intense music comes on. That was the exact... That was the exact feeling that I got, and I locked into that thing. I wanted one so bad, and at the time, I don't know that the Genesis was a thing yet, but they've got 3 different sizes, and they come in different thicknesses, right? And there's a lot of different versions out there. This is a very wieldy version of the Praetorian. It fits the hand better. It's not as tall. It certainly is a tall blade, and it's certainly an overbuilt frame lock, right? But in terms of the Genesis line, this is probably the most wieldy of the bunch. You know, on top of that, with the slightly thinner titanium, we'll go into that here in a sec. Let's do some size comparisons. By the way, the lighting has been officially completely tweaked. So this is exactly how you guys will see things on the channel here on out. Like I've said in previous videos, some of you guys will notice the difference, some of you won't. Depends on the device you're looking at, but hopefully everything's coming through clear. Up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. The Rat 1 is coming in at 8.6 inches overall. So you can see there, it's still big. Definitely, unquestionably big. But not nearly as long as the full-size Praetorian. Up against the Spyderco PM2. Spyderco PM2 is coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian? Or in this case, the Ritter Hogue. Ritter Hogue is coming in at 8 inches overall. So you can see there, we're actually looking at a similar overall length to the Benchmade Griptilian, which is pretty cool. And then last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. Spyderco Para 3 is coming in at 7¼ inches overall. Let's go ahead and do a size comparison. Because of Dirk, I have a Micro Praetorian here. Here it is up against the Micro Praetorian. Now this is a Micro Praetorian tie, so it's very thick, but there you can see the difference in length there. And then I wish, believe me guys, I wish I had a full-size tie to show you. The full-size tie is both longer and taller in blade. The Micro, I'm noticing, is actually a little bit shorter in blade and a little bit shorter in overall length. So as these things go down in size, they're reduced in height as well, which makes them more and more pocket friendly. Of course, you can always carry whatever you want for whatever reason. You know, if you decide you want to carry a full-size Praetorian tie and athletic shorts, that's your decision because it's your money, right? Pretty cool. So how is the action on this guy? The action on this guy, you know, I always tell people this. Medfords are very smooth. When they first come in, this one's clearly been broken in. When you first get one, brand new, they're going to be tight. Not gritty, not poor action, right? They're going to be tight. And the idea there, I've watched a video where Greg explains this. He says, I want it tight at first because I want it to break in and I want it to be solid after it's broken in. I don't want it to be ultra smooth right out of the factory or right out of the gate, and then have it break in and have the blade be wobbly or come off center and have to adjust it right. I want it to break in tight. And that is exactly what happens with these knives. I have handled and owned many Medford knives. They absolutely break in and become incredibly smooth. And the best thing is that the blades always stay centered. Always. The blades always stay centered. Sorry, I bumped my camera there. And they always stay perfectly solid. I mean, listen, if you're going for solidity, right? If your main thing is, I just want the knife to stay solid, I don't like blade play. Medfords, I've never, ever felt blade play in Medford knife. They absolutely are solid. But yeah, this one is actually smooth enough now where I think with just a little bit of encouragement, yeah, it'll fall shut. And I think actually I can do the reverse flick with it, which is pretty cool. Truthfully, the way that I like to open these is sort of a pinch open or a cat's paw open. You keep your fingers back here, put your finger inside of that little groove and open it. It is very easy to manipulate. You can also, of course, given the fact that the blade is so tall and you have that little fuller there, just open it with 2 hands. The blade is going to open, I mean, there's so much space on the knife, right? And now, I've handled a bunch of these, so I mean, I've gotten used to it. It's like anything out there, you know, if you really want to carry it and use it, your hands will adapt to it. But the truth is that there's so much canvas on this knife, there's so much space that it's pretty easy to manipulate. Even if you're brand new to Medfords and you're like, I don't know, I'm going to be transitioning from a flipper, a thumb hole opener, or a thumb stud. Am I going to enjoy it? Is it going to be convenient? Yeah, it's actually totally convenient. I mean, I can sit around and disengage and deploy this thing all day. I mean, I wonder if I can even do, yeah, you totally can flick these out. Truthfully, pretty impressed. At first glance, it does not look like a means of deployment that is going to agree with the human hand, but it does. It really does. Truthfully, guys, it's pretty easy to manipulate. No problems there. Very smooth. Running on phosphor bronze. These things are 100% made to be used. People, I think, you know, at first glance, they look at these, they see the, you know, the profile, they see the colors, they see the craziness, and a lot of people write them off as pocket jewelry, and that's simply not the case. 99% of those people likely have never handled a Medford knife. We're looking at titanium, we're looking at tight tolerances, we're looking at a blade that was professionally ground and absolutely is sharp, regardless of what you hear. And they're made out of materials, you know, in terms of the blade or the frame, they're made out of materials that are meant to be used. And we've got phosphor bronze in there. Yeah, this thing is ready to go. Not to mention the enormous external stops, right? I love external stops. I think that is a much more durable way to set that up. Mitigates pressure away from the pivots in situations where you might have no choice but to use the knife in a way that is outside of the realm of normal for a knife, right? So I applaud that. I really like that. What's next? We can't do the hardware check because, as you guys know, we do have this 6-shooter sort of proprietary pivot. That's been talked about a million times over. Greg has actually discussed this. You can check that out. It's actually Frankie and Bird from Birdshot 4
actually did an interview with him, and he said the idea there with the warranty paperwork is to keep people from getting into the knife and modding it, because we've had knives come back. Somebody tried to put bearings in a Praetorian. Why would you try to put bearings in a Praetorian, right? Why would you do that? People try to send that back, and I got this out of the secondary market. I don't know what happened, and he wants to discourage that, understandably. Now, believe me, it would certainly be nice to get into this knife and be able to make adjustments. But my experience with Medfords is they don't wear in a way that requires you to get in there and tighten things up and do constant maintenance. I've got a lot of knives where that is kind of a thing, and I just kind of do that, periodically. With Medford knives, I think you can just use them and be fine. If you have something wrong with your knife, right, then contact Medford Knives. I have interacted with Greg multiple times, and he has been nothing but absolutely kind to me. Absolutely. I mean, I've called into Medford Knives, and he has answered the phone and been super helpful. So if you buy a Medford and you're concerned with the warranty, don't be. Use the knife that the way that it was intended to be used. And then if something goes wrong, it sounds like Medford Knife and Tool will take care of you, but it probably is case by case, and you should definitely not listen to me. You should contact Medford Knives and find out, what the process is. Anyways, let's talk about carry profile, right? So real quick here, we're going to put this up against a full size. This is another Genesis, right, that I've got right here, which was also sent to me by Dirk. But we're going to look at thickness here. So the T has thinner titanium and a thinner blade stock. We're probably looking at about 125 thousandths on the titanium, and then I know for a fact the blade is about 190 thousandths. On the Praetorian tie, or the Genesis tie, we're looking at, I think, 3/16 titanium and a little over 1/4 of an inch on blade stock. Now don't worry, this guy's going to get its own video, right? But I just wanted to show you guys what we're looking at there. The difference in thickness, this is super cool. I love my overbuilt knives, but in terms of carrying a knife of this size, right, this is much easier to carry. It's much more friendly in the pocket. And I'm also going to put it up against, we're going to do thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. Check this out. The Praetorian is a big knife, but I bet you guys are a little bit surprised to see that it's not much thicker than a Spyderco Para 3. And in terms of height, this is certainly a tall blade. But this is something that surprised me. At maximum height, it's really not that much taller than a Spyderco PM2. And remember, it's like I always say, up against the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3, two knives that have unquestionably awkward carry profiles, but nobody ever seems to complain about it, right? So the size of the T in length is actually shorter than the Spyderco PM2. And it's somewhat close to the overall length of the Spyderco Para 3. In terms of height, at maximum height, it's slightly higher than the PM2. In the pocket, guys, truthfully, this is a wide object, but if you don't carry anything else in your knife pocket, the truth is yeah, the Genesis T and the Genesis series in this thickness, right, these dimensions, actually is a totally carryable, totally reasonable knife in terms of the profile, right? Now, weight is a little bit different here. This blade is a heavy blade, right? The titanium scales are pretty big, but most of the weight is coming from the blade. It's full titanium and it's not milled out. So let's go ahead and get a weight on this guy. Still think it might surprise some people. We're looking at 6.63 ounces. A lot of you guys know that I regularly carry knives between 4 and 6.5 ounces. So this is on the very tippy top end. But yeah, if you're somebody who wears jeans, heavy duty pant material, you work outside, right? Basically what you do day to day is exactly where, the setting that this knife is meant to be carried in, and you're doing things, that this knife was meant to be, used as a tool for. You're going to be just fine with this knife. If you work in an office, you wear light, pant material, you wear skinny jeans, athletic shorts, things like that, then no, use your best judgment. This knife was made to be used in a hard work setting, made to be used and carried outside, and it fits that role. 6.63 ounces is on the heavier side, but it's truthfully not crazy considering what it is that you're getting here. I'm pretty impressed. Now, I think it's also important to point out, guys, and a lot of you know, I love Medford knives. I love this. So there might be some bias that comes out in this, but I'm going to try and give you guys my honest opinion of this. Having owned a full-size T and a full-size tie for nothing more than just wanting to experience the knife, I think I can articulate and give you guys my honest thoughts here.
Let's go ahead and talk about profile here. Now, this one is pretty crazy. We got a lot going on here. There is a few, it appears to have a few upgrades actually. With the anodization going on the pivots and on the hardware, I'm going to say, yeah, that hardware is probably all titanium. You order these from Medford Knife and Tool from the factory, the titanium hardware, unless they have changed it, actually costs more money, right? It's also got an S35VN blade. When I look at retailers, it doesn't seem like S35VN is actually adding to the cost. Now, again, I don't know if they have changed that, but I remember back when the Praetorian tie was, it was originally only available in CPM D2, and then they gave the option to put 3V or S35VN on it. In the case of the tie, that was a $100 upgrade, and the titanium hardware was an additional $200 upgrade. Now, I don't know if all that's still the same. What I can say for certain is that this is not a base version. It doesn't look like a base version, right? The Vulcan blade, as far as I'm aware, does not add any value, or I'm sorry, any additional cost to the knife. And then the base anodization of the scales don't add cost. But this, to me, appears to be an upgraded version of the knife. I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys, number one, there'll be links down in the description if you guys want to shop Medford knives, because there are so many different, all the different models, and then like almost every single one that hits the shelf is in a slightly different configuration. I mean, number one, if you pick up one with the Vulcan finish, you can guarantee it will be unique. Those finishes are not manufactured in certain shapes and patterns, and no, they come out random. So if you order a Vulcan blade, it's going to be a unique thing. A lot of the anodization and a lot of the different patterns that you can get, I mean, take a look at this. These two right here. Lots of different patterns and colors and things. So it's pretty unlikely that you're going to end up with a Praetorian that looks exactly like, or any Medford knife that looks exactly like another one, unless it's just tumbled and tumbled, which is something that I like, but those are the ones that are going to look the same. If you're going for color, they're going to be quite a bit different. So yeah, that's the deal there. The base price of the Praetorian Genesis T, as far as I'm aware, is about $600 to $650. I think it's about $650. Now these do come in, like I said, multiple steels. CPM D2, not D2. CPM D2, which is an entirely different monster. That's something that I really try to explain to people. S35VN, which is what this guy's in. 3V, which is an excellent steel, of course, for toughness. And then we have S90V from DLT Trading. S90V, I think, is an interesting steel to put on this guy. I think it more caters towards collectors. I picked myself up a Praetorian T in S90V, the large size one, and I loved it. But in a user setting, the steels that make way more sense are CPM D2, S35VN, and of course 3V. So this thing is, in its current configuration, is, in my opinion, ready to go. This is a newer variant. Taking a look here, you can see the serialization is on the frame and also on the back side of the blade and also on this side of the frame. And then we have the 6-shooter hardware. It also has the handle screws that go through all the way to the other side, and it has the newer style Praetorian pocket clip. So this is definitely a newer guy. All of these edges, everything around here has been nicely knocked down. It gets aggressive up here on the jimping, but that's on purpose. This knife was made to be used hard, and it was made to be used with gloves. Now, fortunately, you really don't have to interact with this area if you're a fidgety person like me. The only areas you have to really interact with are right here on the lock bar and then up on the spine when you're pushing the blade down. And truthfully, yeah, I probably could do this all day. That lock bar will wear into your finger just a little bit, but they've actually knocked this area down a little bit since the last time that I handled, well, my Praetorian T and tie, and then some of my older Medfords. Those areas were a little bit more aggressive on mine. It seems like they've knocked them down again, so I don't have a problem with that. The jimping up here is very deep, large, and aggressive. It will absolutely bite into your finger. You can use it like that, but if you're going to bear down on this knife and use it for long periods of time, wear gloves. It was intended to be used with gloves. These come in 2 different blade shapes. They come in a tanto, which is what you're seeing here, and then they come in a drop point. The tanto has a hollow grind right here, and then it's got a flat grind up front, and then I believe the drop point is hollow ground all the way through. The flat on the drop point, I think, is a little less prominent. The flat on the tanto is massive. This is the thinner blade stock, and there's no way that that tip is going to take catastrophic damage during normal use. There's just no way. This blade emphasizes, strength and durability above all other things.
Can this knife cut? Is the geometry appropriate for cutting? Yeah, this blade is ridiculously sharp. Absolutely, the glassy smooth finish of a blade that has been professionally sharpened is not one that's easily mistaken with something else. If you've never handled one and you're just looking at it, I can understand why people come to that conclusion. But people who have handled Medford knives will all tell you the same thing. It's thick behind the edge, but it's sharp. It'll cut cardboard, it'll cut paracord, it'll cut, it'll slice paper. I actually demonstrated that. My full thickness Praetorian tie slicing paper, it will do that. Can you shave wax paper or grape? No, but why? So yeah, as you're pushing this blade through material, right, you are pushing a pretty thick kind of wedge of a blade through material. So it's not going to pass through as readily as an Opinel or anything with thinner blade geometry. But is it going to cut? Are you going to be able to get the job done? Yes. In a setting where you have no other choice, right? If you're a soldier, you have no other choice than to use your knife outside of the realm of normal or even safe with a knife. Is this knife going to stand up to that type of abuse? Yes. Whether or not the warranty covers it is a different question, but that's the case with most knife warranties, right? It's not going to cover abuse, but if I was in a situation where I had no other choice but to use just my folding knife in just some sort of crazy, prying the door off a bomb shelter or something like that, obviously that's kind of extreme, but I would be pretty happy to have something this durable and this well made on my person. The fuller is nice looking. It is a little bit sharp on the inside. You can see there, it'll actually catch my fingernails a bit. Not really that big of a deal. It is going to be an area you're going to need to clean if you're going to be using this knife. This area up here is nicely knocked down. All of this is nice. The blade is perfectly symmetrical. The grinds are in the same place on both sides. Nothing wonky going on here. I like the Medford crest. The S, of course, signifying it's an S35VN. If you see a 3, this one actually says 3V. Usually it's just 3. It means it's 3V. And then if you see a D, it's actually CPM D2. And then a 9, I believe it's S90V. The Vulcan on this blade is just amazing. S35VN blades with Medfords, it's not likely you're going to get such a colorful finish. I think they've been able to do that a lot more here lately. But a lot of the really brightly colored Vulcan blades are going to be on the 3V or the D2 blades because they're not stainless in the process. Essentially this sort of patina that kind of forms on the outside is much more vibrant in a steel that is not stainless. So again, this is a pretty unique variant considering it is S35VN and has some pretty interesting colors in the blade. We've got a lot of gunmetal, some subdued kind of bronzy yellows, and then we've got red and orange and kind of some green out there near the edge. Really, really beautiful. Grind lines look great. Everything on the knife looks absolutely great. As I said, we do have external stops that lock in back here, an enormous amount of surface contact, and then in the closed position, they actually contact the frame up here, which is really cool. Absolutely solid in both positions. There's no play or anything like that. Lock up on this guy, it's pretty typical to lock up at, it looks super early, but it's actually something like 25%, and that's a lot of surface contact because the lock bar is pretty wide, and of course the blade tang is very wide. There is no chance that that thing will slip. You would have to put the knife in a vise and beat on the end of the spine with a sledgehammer, which proves nothing. Yeah, Cold Steel Triadlock fans, that proves nothing. I'm sorry to be so brutal there, but there is no amount of human force that you can apply to this knife that is going to disengage that lock bar. It's not, I mean, people try to say, oh, the relief cut is so thin, it's going to buckle at its weakest point. You're not going to be able to apply enough human force to this knife in any reasonable, conceivable circumstance to disengage that lock bar. No way. Nobody will ever change my mind, and I know I'm just welcoming argument there, but go ahead. But no, that's not going to happen. We see these nice lines here, which sort of indicate, where the grip is going to be, or where you're going to be able to gain traction when using this knife. The lines on this guy, this deep area right here where you put these initial 2 fingers, you're locked in. You're not going to drop this knife, especially back here is sort of area that's, to me, it almost, it's a nice place to brace if you're going to do some impact cutting, some light impact cutting. But yeah, ergonomics in this guy, this does feel kind of like a blocky, angular object, but in a situation where I'm going to be wearing gloves, I actually appreciate that. I'm really wanting to lock into the knife because I'm probably going to be using it pretty hard. And that's where they put the emphasis, right? So it's going to be less appealing to people who like to sit around and sort of enjoy all, the excess, the crazy exotic contouring and all that smooth. It may not cater to people like that as well, but as somebody who's going to go out and use it, right, and wear gloves, you're really going to appreciate the lines on this knife. Absolutely. Take a look at the scales here. We've got some beautiful, and of course the oil from my hands is actually causing some of that to not be as vibrant. We'll wipe it off here real quick, but those beautiful purples and blues and the transition here to the bronze is just wonderful. This is more of a polished frame. You can get tumbled, you can get PVD. They got a bajillion different finishes. I honestly don't know enough about all the different finishes and patterns to be able to tell you guys exactly, all the different forms that they come out with. All I can say is, if you want to just go look, just follow the link and go look at some of the stuff that's available. It's pretty cool. Love the oversized Torx head hardware, absolutely. I'm going to guess that's either T8 or T10. It doesn't matter because we can't get into the knife anyway. We have a, I believe these are D2 glass breakers, I think. Sometimes they're 3V, sometimes they're D2. This is a PVD coated glass breaker, it looks like, and then you've got a lanyard hole in it. It will absolutely break glass. And it's also rounded enough to where it doesn't really bother my hand coming in and out of the pocket or just interacting with it in any way. Sometimes glass breakers are just insanely pokey and you create for a really unfriendly experience in and out of the pocket. I just don't have a problem with that glass breaker. It's out of the way, right? The lanyard hole's out of the way. It's not changing anything else. It's fine. The position of this screw back here means that the screw is actually prioritized over the clip. So you have a decent amount of the knife sticking up out of your pocket. But look how much of the knife is actually in your pocket. I'm not going to say that that's shallow carry. Considering everything else that's in your pocket, right? I'm going to say that's somewhere in the middle. It's definitely not deep carry, but it's not shallow carry. There's just too much of the knife that's in your pocket, right? A fair amount sticks up, but surprisingly, it's not a lot of blade. It's really just the scale and the breaker, which, I mean, who cares if the breaker gets marked up, right? I mean, that's the thing you're going to be using to impact whatever surface you're trying to smash, right? So that's fine. The pocket clip is awesome. I love this pocket clip. It's not quite as extravagant as the one that comes on the full tie or the Fat Daddy. I think those have unique clips, but man, is it cool. And it is absolutely functional. It does create a situation where there's a lot of excess thickness in the knife, but truthfully, coming in and out of the pocket, it's easy. The pocket clip is designed correctly. It is made of titanium, and it's going to be a lot more forgiving than a steel clip, and there's a lot of material there. So if it does bend out, fortunately, I think these are actually hex screws, and yeah, you should be able to just take those off and bend it back. The lock bar does not have an over travel stop, but there's enough tension and the pocket clip is resting partially on the frame and partially on the lock bar. It's pretty unlikely you're going to bend that out. There's a lot of tension here. It takes quite a bit of force to move that over. Not enough to where it bothers my hand, but enough to give me security in the fact that, number one, it's locking up correctly, and number two, even if I'm in an adrenaline circumstance and I'm like trying to get my knife put away or whatever, I'm not going to bend that all the way over. It's extremely unlikely, so I don't have a problem with that. Titanium on steel, a carbonized titanium lock face is fantastic for a couple of reasons. Number one, it work hardens. It'll lock up harder and harder and harder every single time it locks up. It might wear a little faster than a titanium insert, but I've never seen a Medford that has, excuse me, I'm in Kansas and I've got allergies, right? So that's a problem here. But anyways, the lock bar is going to have a lot of surface contact. It's going to be a little bit, it does not have lock stick at all, but there is enough friction there that it will lock up much more solid than a titanium, a steel lock bar insert. Those can be a little bit slippery. So it depends less on exactly perfect geometry and more, on just the carbonization between the titanium lock face and the steel tang. Fortunately, the geometry on this thing, the lockup geometry, has also been done correctly. So there is no lock stick. It's easy to disengage, and it's easy to manipulate. I've got no problem with that whatsoever. Really, really cool. So again, we're at 30 minutes here. I knew this was going to be long because I love to talk and I love Medford knives. Things that might bother people. Number one, it's gigantic. If you're not a gigantic knife fan, this isn't going to be for you. Number two, it is a little bit thick behind the edge, right? So if you're planning on shaving toilet paper with your knives, then this probably isn't going to be for you. But if you're really going to go out and beat on it, you're probably going to appreciate that. This area here is a little bit sharp. Worst case scenario, you got to clean it out a little bit more. It might slow you down a little bit while you're cutting. It depends on what you're cutting, right? And it's not really uncomfortable to interact with on your fingers, but if you don't like abrasive or sort of sharp surfaces, it might bother you a little bit. I don't like touching the foam that's on the inside of like car seats. That's a weird thing, but people like or dislike interacting with different materials, you know, as far as their hands go. The area up here in the jimping is definitely aggressive. Wear gloves if you're going to use this knife. But if you're a fidgety person, if you're not, it's not really an area that you have to interact with so much that it's really going to bother you. Other than that, boy, I mean, the big one here is that you can't get into the knife. And I completely understand why people don't like that, right? There's a lot of knife makers out there that do that, right? We hear less complaints about proprietary hardware when it's coming from other makers than we do Medford, because people seem to just want to complain about Greg Medford. My experience with Greg Medford has been positive, so that's all that I can say there. Overall, can I recommend this knife at $650? This is an unquestionably expensive knife, guys. I'm not going to tell anybody that they have to spend that much money to get quality in a folding knife, but you're not going to find this design, this shape, this profile. You're not going to find this type of presentation anywhere else. Is that part of what you're paying for? I don't really know. What I can say is that this is made in the USA. These are hand-tuned, hand-checked, hand-assembled. That does take more money. The cost of manufacturing, the cost of creating this knife is much higher, and there's much more human attention to, you know, what the final form that this knife takes, right? There's so much more in this knife than a $200 Wii knife, right? Can you get titanium and S35EN for $200? Yeah, definitely. Does as much work or does as much care go into that knife, you know, versus this knife? No. And a lot of times, in fact, pretty much all the time, those knives are going to be made in China, where, guess what? Manufacturing and labor costs are substantially less. So do I think this knife is worth $650? Yeah. Me personally, judging by all of the knives that I've handled, ranging anywhere from $20 all the way up to about $3,000. I've handled a lot of knives, guys. Yeah. This is definitely a $650 knife. I'm not going to question that at all. There are, you know, we can, you know, go around and round and round all day. Would it be, you know, if it was $50 less, would it be, you know, would it be tempting? You know, for a lot of people, this knife won't be tempting unless it's $100. And for a lot of people, they're going to look at this and go, I might pay as much as $800 for that. It's eye of the beholder. But again, based on what I have experienced with Medford knives and what I've experienced with knives ranging from $20 to $3,000, yeah, there's $650 here. Guys, that's going to be pretty much it for today's super long review. Really cool. Remember, subscribe to Dirk Warning. I know he's already hit 1,000, but it's worth subscribing to him. He's got some amazing content. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this metal complex logo right here and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody.